Hi ladies, so last time we learned about what covalent compounds or molecular compounds are. Now we're going to learn how to name them. So whenever you are looking at a molecular compound, you're looking at two non-metals. That means if you were to look on your periodic table, they would both of your elements that you're looking for are going to be on the right side here. And they're going to do this combination in more than one way. So it's important that we have to use a little bit different formula whenever we are naming our compounds. So, for example, the elements for carbon and oxygen can combine in a couple different ways, and you may have seen these before. We have CO as well as CO2. Now, you might be familiar with CO2 as this is what you breathe out. And CO is what comes out of your car. So, according to how we named things the last time, we could both call these like carbon oxide. However, it's very important to be able to see which one is which, because CO, carbon monoxide, is actually very poisonous if you were to breathe it in a lot. So that's what comes out of your your tailpipe of your car. So that's why you want to make sure you open your garage door before turning your car on. And CO2 is what you breathe out. So if you were to be swimming underwater, the bubbles that you're making are from CO2. So instead of naming our compounds similar to like our ionic compounds, we use something a little bit different. So whenever we are naming our molecular compounds, we use prefixes. So I will happily give these to you on a test. However, you should understand that anytime you see mono, that means the number 1, whereas di means the number 2, tri, just like a tricycle, that's going to be 3, and so on and so forth. So it tells you how many different atoms are in the compound you're looking for. So let's take a look back at our carbon-oxygen example. So we would use prefixes to tell how many atoms are present in a molecule. So, for example, we have one carbon as shown by the lack of a subscript for both of these. So both of these would start with the name carbon. However, whenever you're looking at our oxygens, they have different numbers of oxygens. So we want to make sure that we tell our reader or whoever is looking at this how they are different. So since mono means 1 and we only have 1 oxygen in our compound here, we would call this compound of CO carbon monoxide. So once again, we are taking the first syllable and dropping the rest of the word and then adding IDE. However, our difference is we are going to start with our prefix of mono. Now, if we were to look at carbon CO2, again, we're going to start out with that 1 carbon, but the number of oxygens is different. So the prefix that we would use here is di, and then we are going to name it exactly the same as oxide. So the difference here is our prefix. We start off with mono if it is 1 and di if it is 2. So to name any binary molecule that is a molecular compound, you're going to follow these rules. You want to write the names of the elements in order that they're listed. Then you're going to use prefixes to show how many are there. So the only exception is if it's our first element, if the first one only has 1 of those atoms, then you are going to get rid of our mono. All of the rest are the exact same as you would normally write them. Then you would take your second element and add IDE to the end. So if we are going to give this a shot, let's take a look at N2O here first. So just like I said before, you're going to write the name of the elements in order that they are listed. So it would be nitrogen and oxygen. Okay, so we have 2 nitrogens, so we would use our prefix of di. And then our second one, there's only one. So we need to make sure that we write mono. So let me give a little bit of space. All right, we have mono, and then we need to write oxygen again. But remember, we only write the first syllable. So we're going to drop our YGEN and add IDE instead. So if you were to write that or read that all at once, that would be dinitrogen monoxide. So let's try the second one here. We have potassium. Oh, I'm sorry, phosphorus. And we have chlorine. So first of all, we're going to look and we see that there's only one of our phosphorus. And remember, we do not write mono for the first word. So our phosphorus is good. We are done with that one. And now we're going to take the subscript of our second one, which is 3. If you look back on that chart, that is tri. And then remember, we got to change the ending. So we would take chlor and then add IDE. So remember, we are getting rid of INE and we are adding IDE instead. And if you need that written out a little bit nicer, there it is right there for you. And then adding those prefixes to get the same answers that we have before. Now to write the formula from, so that was the name. If you want to write the formula, so like the couple elements from your periodic table, you're going to use those prefixes to tell how many subscripts for each element in the formula. Then you would write out your symbols for your elements as well as the subscript together. So if we were to look at tetraphosphorus trisulfide, we're going to use some different prefixes that we haven't used before. So first of all, we know that tetra, if you were to look back on that list that I gave you, tetra means 4. And let's take a look at our second one, which is tri. Tri means 3. Then you want to look at your periodic table. So once you have figured out what your prefixes mean, you want to figure out, oh, phosphorus, that means a capital P, and sulfide means a capital S. So if you were to write all of these together, you would take your symbol, which for phosphorus, which is P, followed by its subscript, which is 4. Then you would go to your second element, which is sulfur, capital S, and its subscript, which is 3. And so overall, you would get P4S3 as a formula for tetraphosphorus trisulfide. So let's try our hand at a couple more here. So remember, we don't write that number 1 if it is the first word. Okay, so we have nitrogen trifluoride. So the fact that this does not have any prefix tells you that there is 1. Tri means 3. Then we would write our prefixes, or our element symbols. So if you were to do that, nitrogen is a capital N from our periodic table. Fluoride, if you were to take off that IDE, that just means it is fluorine. So that's a capital F. Then you would write your subscripts. We do not write the number 1, so this one's all set, followed by our subscript for 3 after that F. Let's try the second one. We have, let's circle our prefixes. Di means 2, so we have 2 of those. And now we want to write our element names, or our element symbols. Sulfur is a capital S, and chloride, if you were to look at your periodic table, that's actually chlorine. So that would be Cl. Then we would write our subscripts 2 and 2. Now something to notice is that we do not reduce. Sorry about that. So that is a big difference from our ionic compounds. We do not reduce because we have to tell exactly how many of each one is there. If you need that written out a little bit nicer, there it is for you in your notes as well. And as always, we have some key informations to remember at the end of every section. So that's it for me today. I'll see you tomorrow.